Today on the Brand Aid podcast.
Boy, you guys sure are lucky. And then Sherry just turned to her and said, yeah, we are. We're lucky we're not lazy.
Welcome to Brand Aid, where we answer the question, what does it take to launch your own brand revolution, create evolution, and who are the people that help you foster connection, community, contribution, and currency for a brand built to last. You will also meet brands changing the world and the lives of those they serve. Here's your host, Cheryl Hodgson.
If you broke an arm or leg in a ski accident, an automobile accident, or a loved one needed emergency medical treatment on the battlefield, you would probably never know that the Sam medical products would be there to save lives. My guests today are Dr. Sam and Cheryl Scheinberg, founders of Sam Medical. The Sam Splint is used by emergency on-scene medical responders around the globe. Dr. Scheinberg began his early career on the battlefields of the Vietnam War, and after a successful career in orthopedic medicine, retired to launch a business based upon a big idea that nagged him for years. Fast forward 30 years later, my guests have truly created an evolution and a revolution in emergency medicine with a brand that changes the lives of those they serve. Please welcome Dr. Sam and Cheryl Scheinberg.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Hodgson. Welcome to today's episode of the Brand Aid podcast. I'm here with my guests today, Dr. Sam and Cheryl Scheinberg, co-founders of Sam Medical Company based out of Portland, Oregon. Welcome, Sam and Cheryl.
Good morning, and
good
thank
morning.
you for asking us.
Oh, it's happy to have you guys. We've known each other for a long time as friends, and we've done some business together. And I just was so excited to have you guys on as a guest on my show because you're really a brand, and you have a brand, the Sam Medical Company, that has really fits the bill in terms of my idea of sharing with the world what brands and branding can mean, which is that you guys have taken one product and your company, not overnight, but over quite a length of time, has turned into a global force in the emergency medical field. And I just can't wait to chat with you about that.
Well, here we are.
Here we are. So, here's the thing. I think that a lot of times people looking from the outside in, they think, oh, how did you build that company? Or that was easy for you, right? But, it's also inspirational to talk to someone like you guys who have really literally changed the face of emergency medicine over the years and realize that you started out with one product, right?
Well, we started with no product.
You had an idea, right?
Yeah, that's all. We know what that's worth, not much.
Well, but Sam, how did you take it from an idea to a product?
Well, that's a great question. I think the first thing I should establish is I didn't do anything. We meaning Sherry and I, did everything together. Alone, I don't think I would have ever gotten off the couch, to tell you the truth.
Are you telling me you were a couch potato?
Well, I'm not as it'll be perfectly obvious to anybody, if anybody views this thing, that it'll be clear that I'm not, the most charismatic, dynamic guy in the world. As Sherry would say, I'd have to open one eye in order to wink. So, I mean, I have a surgeon personality, not very much inclined to get excited over one thing or the other. But on the other hand, I have a wife who is just a dynamic, energetic force. She's like the Energizer Bunny.
Yes, she is a force of nature. I will agree with you about that.
Well, I'm glad you do. And I'm more of the Pepe Le Pew, just kind of steadily moves along, chasing whatever.
There's my lighting. Okay.
Anyway.
So
then
Well,
That's just the
okay.
truth
Well,
of the matter.
Sam, you mentioned that you were a surgeon. Why don't you share a little bit? You started out in Vietnam, right? You've worked your way through medical school. You were in the army, right?
Well, no, I grew up in Tennessee and went to medical school in Tennessee, and I by a total accident discovered the San Francisco Bay Area, and I read a book. It was Jack Kerouac's Big Sur, and he described, not my favorite author, but he had a wonderful description of the Big Sur area. And I read that as while I was in medical school, and I thought, wow. And he described this bridge. I think he slept under a bridge, so I said to myself, I'm going to find that bridge, and I'm going to sleep under that bridge. And I did. So that's how I ended up in the Bay Area, and it was a blessing because
Which bridge was it?
oh, it was near Pfeiffer Beach. If anybody's familiar with the Big Sur area, not too far from Nepenthe. It's a great restaurant. I presume is closed because of the Corona thing, but um, anyway, and it was my great fortune that I was walking out of the county Oakland County Hospital, which where I was interning, and this lecherous psychiatrist was walking in the door at the same time. And so I said, "Hey, Steve, what's happening?" And he said, "Party, ferry building, San Francisco, lots of girls, 7 o'clock." That's all. That was the whole conversation. Took 2 seconds. But since I was working about 125 hours every week, I thought, wow. And this was my night off. I thought, I heard that, he said girls, and candidly female, and I didn't even care about the species. I just wanted to be near something that was female. And so I headed out to the Bay Area and found the ferry building, and my wife would say I wasn't dressed to the hilt. I had 6 sports coats I'd bought for $30 at a pawn shop, and I was wearing Madras when no one had worn Madras for probably 10 years, and I had a little clip-on bow tie, and I thought I really looked good. And so I walked in, and I saw this lovely girl, and I asked her to dance, and she gave me the firmest no that had ever been given. It was an amazingly strong no that basically said, not today, not ever, not in a million, not if you're the last guy on the planet. So I was okay. I was grateful because I didn't have time. I looked around and saw even prettier girl, gliding across the dance floor. She was wearing this green satin dress and had her hair all on top in this beautiful pastiche, and that was Sherry. So I played the only card I had. I went up to her and it was a sympathy card, and I said, "That girl over there wouldn't dance with me. Would you dance with me?" And what did you say, honey?
I said, it's a charity function. Why not?
That's
That's
that.
what I said.
That to me was critical because I met you, and you added all this energy and ambition to my life. And at that point, I ended up, I got a message from Lyndon Johnson to go, an invitation to go into the Army. And within probably 6 months, I was in the mountains in Vietnam, the Central Highland. One of the first patients I saw at that point, I was a general surgery resident. One of the first patients I saw was injured in a landmine, and so he had a blast injury and a burns, and he was placed in an air splint and then flown over a mountain to come down to the little hospital where I was working. And of course, at altitude, that air splint filled up with air, and it got very tight on him. And when he landed, his hand was white. He didn't have any sensation in it. So I thought I better get this off, and I unzipped it and removed it. And because it was an air splint and he had burns, it removed all the skin off of his arm when I peeled off the splint. So now I had a patient with open fractures of the forearm and no skin. And I thought, oh my God. So at that point, I'd never thought about it for a second about splints or anything like that. But I realized whatever he was in was a terrible device for the military. And so in the back of my mind, that seeded a thought that here was an unmet need. And a few years later, when I was out of the Army and in an orthopedic residency, I had a long day of surgery. Came home, was decompressing. Sherry just handed me a little stick of gum. Maybe it was Wrigley's, I don't know. And I I just removed the wrapper, and it had a rather nice aluminum wrapper inside of the paper wrapper, and I started playing with it on my finger as Sherry was playing with our kids on the floor, and I noticed that little aluminum foil splinted the last digit on my little finger. And all of us have wrapped a little aluminum around our fingers, haven't you, Cheryl? Surely you have.
Absolutely.
And I just thought, wow, this is splint. And it had nothing to do with the inherent strength of the material. It had only to do with the shape of the little aluminum foil. So it occurred to me we could make a universal splint out of some thin malleable aluminum. And so the next day, Sherry and I uh, drove to a local metal supplier, and they just kind of threw some aluminum at us just to get rid of us. I don't think they even charged us anything. And so we took that little rectangle of malleable aluminum and wrapped it with Johnson and Johnson surgical tape, and it was our first splint. It worked just like the gum wrapper, and that's how it all began. And that really was how it began.
But then it wasn't an overnight success, because that little prototype spent some time in the closet, didn't it?
Oh, well, fortunately, I had a very kind chief of orthopedics and a very kind head of the emergency department at Louisville General. That's where I was in my orthopedic residency. And they gave me permission to prototype and to try the prototypes in the emergency department. Nowadays, it would probably take, 2 years of permission and everything else. But in those days, people could just do things, thank God. And so we created some prototypes and took them to the emergency department, and we learned from that. And eventually, we had a very workable model, and I even presented it to the military. I'm not sure how I made contact with them, but I did. And it was funny because when I did a little presentation in front of the generals there, one of them, I remember, piped up and said, if you bent that correctly, you could probably kill somebody with it. I said, well, that's not the plan exactly. But then somebody recommended that we give it to a friend of his to manufacture. And at that point, Sherry and I were getting ready to leave the country for Scotland. And so we didn't want to do that. So we just set it aside. And I returned from Scotland after a year and went into orthopedic practice on the Oregon coast. And it probably would have remained in the closet if it wasn't for my wife, Sherry. And honey, you want to pick it up from there? It was about 1984.
Yes.
When Sherry, go ahead, honey.
Well, I met you in 1981, just to put this in context.
That's right.
And
that's
I
right.
recall being in New York City with you guys. I think it was by coincidence. We've had that happen several times over the years, where we've ended up in the same city at the same time. But I remember specifically you had this splint with you, and we were in your hotel room in New York City.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you said something like, Sam, we're going to build a company with this.
Well, but that's ultimately what happened. Honey, you want to describe?
Well, I think what happened is Sam we were down in Newport doing surgery on a hip, and we got a call from one of the other coastal towns up in Lincoln City, Oregon, and they had a little girl there that had a fracture, and we said we'd come up as soon as we could. And so it was like 3.5, 4 hours later when we got up there, and unfortunately, she had been placed in an air splint, and and your arm swells, and they didn't release the pressure on it, and she ended up with a bad result. And so based on that, we had to send her out. So I have no idea ultimately what happened to her, but it was not going to be good. And so I chased him around the room and I said, this should never happen again. It's that darn air splint. And it could have been our kid that this happened to. So I said, you've got to promise me we're going to do something with this splint. And our house was not very big. And in fact, I have a little tag I wear on occasion that says nag tag. And so he promised me, and between the two of us and his brains and a lot of work, and me not accepting no for an answer, here we are, you know.
Well, and I think that's really important. There's two things there. One is, could you kind of just real briefly, one of you describe how the splint works and what's made it revolutionary? I mean, how
Go
does
ahead, sweetie.
Okay, well, I think it's the curve. When something is totally flat, and anybody can take, if they've got a piece of paper by their side right now or a magazine or anything, you take it, it's flat, it's very malleable. You put a little curve in it, and it's a physics principle, it becomes rigid. And you can corrugate it, it becomes stronger. You can I-beam it, it becomes stronger. But then you can flatten it out. And it was the thinness of the aluminum that made it so strong. So they can make a splint out of anything. So that's pretty much what we did. And that's pretty much the basics of it, is no strength. And I liken it, when I do trade shows, to like when we're 13 or something, we're really pretty, but we're not very smart. When we get in our 30s, we get a little wrinkle in our skin and we get stronger and smarter. And then as those wrinkles get deeper, you get really smart, unless you get Botox, and then it flattens it out again and you get stupid again. So that's how I do it. It's the wrinkle theory. And that's pretty much how it works. It's very simple, and that's what made it fun. But at the same time, we were up against everything that was hard or that you blew into. So it was a total paradigm shift for the medical community. So we had to go show and tell a lot and be exposed to a lot of things we had never been exposed to before. But I think the beauty of what Sam and I went through is his experience in orthopedics or medicine is nothing is ever a 5-second fix. And things take a long time, and you're exposed to a lot of side issues that happen that you have no control over. So we didn't, read a book and say, this is what you do, and you go out and you build this business. That's I think, makes it tough for a lot of people who think that that's how you build a business. You've just got to go jump in the pool and just know that whatever you have, you've got to really believe in it, and hopefully believe in yourself, and not listen to naysayers or anything else, and just focus on what you want. And I knew that this was going to be a better outcome for anybody than what they had in the field. And it was all about the patient and taking care of them that I think made a big difference.
Well, how did you guys go about sharing the product with the world once you started manufacturing it?
That's a good point.
I happen to know the answer to that question, but
well, an idea, I think one of the things that all budding entrepreneurs, everything starts with an idea, which I think, and sometimes the idea is first before they even think about whether their idea actually solves a problem for anyone else. They just think they have a cool idea. Well, the first thing you discover is an idea is worth, that zero. It's what you then do with it, and whether it actually, first of all, it has to sincerely meet a need, an unmet need that's in the world. And once I had the experience of fully understanding there was an unmet need out there as far as splints were concerned. So. The real question is, what do you do? The first thing we did was we just did what anyone would do. We thought, let's show it to somebody else besides ourselves. And so there was a trainers meeting in Portland, an athletic trainers meeting. And we heard about the meeting, and we showed up at the meeting, had a tiny little booth. There were 25 athletic trainers who showed up. It was a massive meeting. And that's about exactly the number of splints that we sold at that meeting. And I think we were selling them for about what they sell for now. It was either $7 to $10 or whatever it was. And then that night that we came home, we felt really good. Wow, people would actually buy this. But actually, after penciling the whole thing out, lying in bed that night, it was obvious to me that we had lost at least $1 for every splint that we made. So I remember turning to Sherry and said, "Honey, God, I sure hope we don't sell 1,000,000 of these. We'll never crawl out from under this mess." So what we learned was we can't afford to sell them ourselves. That was lesson number one. We have to find people who are set up. Nowadays, that was a day when there was no internet. So we didn't have the option of selling over the internet or anything like that. So we decided we needed to find people who already had sales organizations set up. And I think maybe Sherry found there was a big EMS, Emergency Medical Services meeting somewhere. I don't remember where, perhaps she does. And so we contacted them and obtained some booth space and showed up, and there we were. And nothing's easy. Sherry, being a very sociable lady, there was a lady there who was working for a company that's still, the name's still in existence, but it's changed hands about 15 times since then. And so she went up to a lady who was allegedly a vice president of this company and said, "We're just starting out, and could you give us some suggestions as to what we might do to grow the business?" And she was very kind. She looked at Sherry and said, "Oh yeah, I can do that, but that's going to cost you a lot of money." And then we had a few other people who then came up to us and said, "We'll take this product off your hands. You're never going to build a one product company." And they wanted to do us a favor. "We'll just give us for $1,000, or we'll take it off your hands and you won't have to suffer anymore." That was the kind of thing. But at the end of that meeting, we had some names. And of course, we contacted them, did some follow up, and we came out with one of the bigger EMS companies that sold at that time. They don't exist anymore either. And they took the product on. So inch by inch, trade show by trade show, booth by booth, we pushed our name out there and pushed the product out there. And that's how it all began. And nobody's better. The booth queen is my wife.
Well, speaking of the booth queen, Sherry, how many trade shows would you estimate that you guys have been to in the last 30 years?
Oh my goodness.
We've been to hundreds, but I'm going to take it way back because Sam jumped.
Well, that's no small thing. So that's been your chief marketing strategy, is trade shows.
And I think this is the big issue where a lot of people, because in our company now, we see a lot of new ideas and everything else. And the big problem is people come with ideas, but they haven't put the time or money into coming up with a prototype to make sure it works. And I think taking it all the way back, we had our gum wrapper, we researched all sorts of different coverings and everything else. And it wasn't an overnight thing at all. And we started out, making it by hand in a tiny little shed with, rolling it out with a rolling pin. And
what was the first name of the company?
It was called, and that's kind of fun too. We called it the Seabird Company because we lived by the sea. Our last name was Scheinberg. And if it didn't do well, nobody would ever miss it. So, that way,
That's true. We didn't want to connect ourselves up to the product in case it was a complete flop.
Yeah. So I think, there was a long period of time and of hit and miss and everything else. And we had to do everything by hand, and we would take needles from his office because we'd put an adhesive on the back and we'd roll it out with a rolling pin and then we'd
bubbles.
we'd suck out the little bubbles and everything. So there were lots and lots of tries and errors and everything. But again, I think the biggest thing is a lot of people come up with ideas, but they've got to come up with a prototype, a working prototype, before they take it to anybody or show it to anybody. because that's a big flaw. And then again, after we started getting it, going to trade shows, it was show and tell, show and tell. And people would be interested in it, but none of the distributors would be interested in it at all, because they're just lazy. They're order takers, a lot of them. So I would physically ask the people who they like to buy from. And so we went to a lot of state shows, and I would go take them over to whoever they bought things from and tell them, here's somebody who wants to place an order. So that's how we started building it little by little. And I think Sam's credibility as a physician, and he's an orthopedic surgeon, and he's not an arrogant kind of guy.
And not look arrogant, honey.
No. And and he's a quiet, but he's a methodical guy, and the credibility, and he would be kind to everybody when I would want to slap them on the side of their head or kick them in the groin or something, something amusing like that, because I would get so angry at him. But it didn't matter, just little by little, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trade shows. And we did it on pretty much our own dime. We didn't borrow any money from relatives, friends, or anything else like that.
Well, there's a reason for that. We didn't want we didn't want to lose anybody's money. I mean,
yes.
If it was going to be lost, we wanted it to be ours and ours alone. I mean,
and I think that's a big difference now, is everybody has a GoFundMe, or they get rounds and rounds of millions of dollars. And
they have maybe $1 million.com things going on, and there's a good reason to, we have certain things that we look at now, and looking backwards. Look, none of us are Jack Welch, and look, we're just like ordinary folks who somehow through persistence developed this successful company.
Whether you are CEO of your own evolving brand, or you are serving as guide and mentor to other emerging brand owners, it's important to include legal protection for valuable brand assets. Brand names and logos, as well as other intellectual property, are often the most valuable business assets a company will ever own. Registered trademarks for product names, logos, and slogans are a potent weapon against domain hijackers, cyber squatters, as well as other later entrants into the market. In my international best-selling book, Registered Trademark, The Business Owner's Guide to Brand Protection, I reveal my simple 3-step process to help select, secure, and sustain protection for your own brand dream team. And I'll share how to bulletproof your business both online and off. As my special gift to our listeners, you can receive a free copy of my book. Simply go to brandaid.com/free gift to receive your copy today, and you'll pay only for shipping and handling.
What was the big breakthrough for you guys? I mean, I know we had discussions years ago about, that this could be a useful item, the Splint in particular, because it is a disposable item and portable. It could be carried by the military. And that wasn't an overnight by any means, was it?
No.
Well, I can tell you that story very well. No, it's both happy and sad in so many ways. Of course, we wanted that to occur.
Well, let's just start with the present day. It's now carried by almost every member of the military, almost anywhere in the world that's in active combat.
It is, and oftentimes, of course, they've ripped your product off.
Or a knockoff.
It's a knockoff, but it's still
yours was actually knocked off too, right?
Oh, it still is.
It's an honor that I prefer someone else have, but it's just the way it is, But it is nice to know that almost everywhere in the world, if militaries are using the product that we developed here in this little community on the Oregon coast. Of course, we have
at our kitchen table.
Yeah, we have many.
Yes, and the thing that's exciting, Cheryl, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the thing that's exciting, because it is knocked off and the patent is expired, So obviously we have other products that are out there, since a lot of companies are one product companies. But to think that his idea, done, invented and manufactured and patented, all from our kitchen on the Oregon coast, and it's used all over the world. And it's kind of cool that people knock you off, because they only knock you off when you're accepted and you've got like at least 10 or 15% of the business. So as long as they are using it correctly, I don't care, because it's about patient care, not about us.
Well, yeah, but I want to touch on this fact because you did have a patent for a number of years, and patents are only good for 17 years, right?
Right.
So,
a little
or
longer
were at that
now.
time. So, but was, intellectual property an important part of your ability to at least get launched at the beginning?
Well, yeah, of course we did obtain, and it wasn't easy. Again, everything is hard. In fact, I would just say I remember Sherry was having her nails done, and I happened to walk in. Boy, what a horrible odor that is!
Yes.
How you
In
guys
the old days.
Oh man! But anyway, I walked in, and there she's getting her nails done, and the lady, a nice lady, was doing her nails, and I just heard that conversation. And what I heard when I walked in, she was looking at Sherry and said, "Sherry, boy, you guys sure are lucky." And then Sherry just turned to her and said, "Yeah, we are. We're lucky. We're not lazy." And I think that sums it up, because the amount of effort is tremendous. You hear it, but until you experience it, and we had the luxury of, I think I did, certainly, I think Sherry did to a lesser extent, of having, and not everything so easy in life, and so I was accustomed to failure and bad news and disappointment. You can be inured to that, like wearing a watch. After time, you just say, okay, so I failed, so what? And that's the nature.
You keep going if you believe.
Yeah, I tell people, when you go into, somebody comes in from an auto accident. I did a lot of trauma. Of course, did both 500 surgeries in Vietnam, and God knows how many after that. And somebody shows up at the emergency room in all kinds of states of disrepair. Everything's broken. Maybe they're wound around a winch on a fishing boat. Who knows? And I mean, you don't have the option in a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours walking out and telling the family, "Oh well, I couldn't figure that one out. Too bad." I mean, you've got to figure it out. That's the thing. And so you can't get disappointed or upset if one track you start on doesn't work. You'll try another. I mean, and so that's the nature of what we do. But as I was just saying, that looking back, and now we've been at this so long, we can look back, and it turns out the things that we didn't know to do but just did by trial and error are the things that we do now, that we're, I would say, an actual functioning company with all the things and departments and things that a big functioning company has. Now we understand. We got an idea, where people give us ideas or send us ideas, or they come in-house, but the first thing we do is, we don't start with an idea so much as we look for unmet needs, things that really are going to be useful. And then we ask ourselves, which is what we did in the days that with our first product, the Splint, is, are there enough people out there who'd be interested in buying it, so that we could get a return on our investment, make some money, because you can't continue on if you don't meet your bills. And so we asked that, and we also, with the Splint, the first thing I said to myself, and I said to Sherry, I said, this is really unique. This is special. This is different than anything else out there. And we call that term now, we didn't have a term then, but we call it a first mover, something that actually changed the thinking in the field. The term paradigm shift is just so trite now. You hear it. It's like the word hero. You hear it so often, it has no meaning anymore. But people know what a hero really is, and they know what it really isn't. And they also know if a product or an idea, is something that's going to meet a sincere unmet need. I mean, if you have enough money, you can sell anything, I think, for a while, but not forever. The general public's too smart for that. So we asked that question: unmet need. Is it a first mover? And then, according to what you were saying, we asked, can we own it? Can we own the idea? I mean, if you can't protect it, the brand and the idea, I mean, it's possible to sell your neighbor's car, but ultimately that's going to put you in a bad place, a little concrete box. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, I had a few friends who tried that. It doesn't work. So you've got to be able to own the idea.
I have a question. What is the most exciting adventure you had at any one of these trips? I know you shared with me one time that you had dinner with generals in Beijing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Sam.
Well, Sherry, I would just say, when we a long time ago were invited to Beijing by a lady whose name was Meow. Her father was a general that painted those big pictures of Chairman Mao that were on the big. I don't know if they're still there. We haven't been there for so long, but anyway, so we're at this trade show, and it just opens up, and the guy who became the Grand Poobah of all China, he was the second in command of the party then, but he ultimately became leader of the whole country. He comes up with his entourage, and he's wearing this power blue suit. I envision everybody in a military uniform with a red star, but no. He comes up with his entourage, and I don't think anybody had touched this man in the last 10 years. But Sherry, being Sherry, as soon as he comes up to the booth, and he spoke better English than I did, I'll tell you. But later on, he met Bill Clinton, and I noticed he had an interpreter. This guy could understand the president perfectly well. If he can understand Southern USA, which is what I speak, he can understand Bill Clinton absolutely perfectly. But anyway, so Sherry immediately takes one of our Sam Splints, and she whips it right on him and starts doing her standard Sherry demo, which is a very physical thing. And this guy was grinning from ear to ear. He actually wanted to be touched. He wanted someone to connect. And it was wonderful to watch that happen. I mean, I enjoyed the heck out of it. What can I say? So that was a big moment. And I would say one of the things in that trip was going into this big room, and it was a bit unusual to have Americans there, and everybody was in military uniform and the red Chinese uniform, but Sherry and myself, and we noticed that they were dancing, and they were dancing. Men were dancing with men, and women with women, and men and women, but quite more often than not, it was men dancing with men and women dancing with women. And so Sherry says, "Well, what are you going to do if one of these guys comes up and asks you to dance?" I said, "Well, honey, if he's a colonel or above, the only question I'm going to ask him is, do you want to lead or shall I?" I mean, unfortunately for me, a very graceful lady of good rank came up to me and asked me to dance, and I'm like a panda bear on the dance floor. I mean, it's disgraceful, like a bear on roller skates. But she was so graceful. She was gliding around. I don't know. Honey, why don't you tell them when you splinted that cigar for an admiral? That was fun.
Well, I have no fear when it comes to things like that. And I like to have fun, and I know they do too. And again, back to the general in Beijing, he was having a good time, and but you could see that his staff was just wide-eyed. You could not, their mouths were like, "Oh my God, what do we do with this?" But my father smoked cigars, and so we were seeing an admiral. I guess he was an admiral, but because I don't really know all my stars and stripes, and to this day,
he was an admiral of an
he was-
aircraft carrier, Hunter. Trust me, he was an admiral.
Anyway, I had a little tiny finger splint, and I made it into a splint for a finger, and I stuck it on the end of his cigar, which he was smoking. And he got a big kick out of that. But I'm just saying, we've been put in position with a lot of interesting people all over the world. And I just love it all. We had a wonderful trip recently with a brand new product. We were in.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you next. Let's share.
Yeah.
Fast forward 30
Good.
years later. What's
Yes.
the new product that we can now share with the world, because it was top secret for a while,
Yes.
but now it's available, and
it's a new interosseous apparatus. I'll let you talk.
yes,
Sam.
for people who don't know what an interospia, it's the SAM-IO, right?
It's
Right.
the SAM-IO.
Well, you obtain entrance to our vascular system through IVs, like sticking needles in veins, and sometimes you thread lines up those PICC lines, peripheral lines, up in centrally, so you can give medication or blood or whatever near the center of our circulatory system. But typically you do this through a vein, but there are other ways to do it. And one way is to stick a needle directly into the marrow of the bone. And if you think about it, our blood cells are formed in our bone marrow, so they have to have a way to get out. And so you can inject anything really that you can give intravenously, any kind of medication. You can give IV fluid, you can give blood into the marrow of a bone, and it will circulate out to the rest of the body. For example, if I put a needle into the head of your humerus, that is into your shoulder, and inject medication, it'll be in your heart in about 2 seconds. That's how fast it gets there. So there are some good products out on the market now, but we thought we could, create some improvements and some benefit to the end user. We again said, what does the end user want? And we developed what is called the SAM intraosseous, or SAM-IO, and we launched it just about a month ago or so, beginning of March. And well, of course, we picked probably the worst time in history to do it.
Yes, because we now are dealing with a global virus.
Yeah,
Yes.
we had tons of interest, and of course but as soon as the pandemic hit, we weren't able to make contact with anybody. And so we're learning. This is part of our learning process with you, Cheryl, is to learn to make contact online. So already this morning at 7 a.m., there was a meeting with our sales force and our training force with people around the country using Zoom. And,
yes, thank God for Zoom. What would we do without it?
There's another one going on as we speak. It started at 11 o'clock, and there'll be another one at 3 o'clock, and the same thing's going to happen tomorrow, and on and on. So we're learning because we have to learn a way to get
to adapt. Well, I think that's what everyone, and there's a lesson there that
crisis and opportunity.
It's an opportunity, yes.
Absolutely. And I'll sort of back up a little bit, because I know, when people have heart attacks or they've tried to start an IV 3 or 4 times, or people are dehydrated, you cannot get an IV in. And it's expensive to keep trying, and it's really traumatic on the patient. And this way, they just get it right into the bone. They're ready to go. It's much faster, much safer, and you're going to save a lot more lives and
less expensive.
And much less expensive.
So this comes up, just to clarify, the SAM-IO is going to be used, say, in an emergency when an EMT arrives at someone's home and they're having a heart attack?
Yeah, right
possibly?
now. You're right. Yeah, that's right. Right now, that it's becoming a standard for cardiac arrest because you don't have too many times to miss getting an IV, and you better get it in quickly. And so it's hard to miss a bone. They're pretty easy to feel and to spot, and the landmarks are fairly obvious. So that's a great advantage, and we think we have a product. Well, we know we have a product that has advantages over the existing ones, though there are good existing ones. We think there's enough of a difference between ours and theirs that ours can succeed.
And also for trauma. And a lot of times if somebody is in an auto accident and they can't get to them or get them out easily, it's really hard to start IVs. And this way they can get IVs into them quickly. There's just a lot of things. But we also have other products. You know, we improved a lot on tourniquets. So we have a Stop the Bleed kit. We have a lot of different things. And
we do.
It's kind of fun. It's new things coming all the time. And so it's an exciting time to be, you know, in something. And like this.
Before we end, I want to thank you guys so much for sharing, but I wanted to ask you a couple of things. What's on your bucket list that you haven't done yet?
Well, we have two lists. One's a bucket and one rhymes with bucket. That's all the things that I'm not going to do for the rest of my life.
Okay. Well, I'll
and that list is kind of important to me.
Yes. Sam's enjoying this quarantine time. It's not been bad because I mean, we live on the Oregon coast.
Yes, you're quarantined in your beautiful new home on the Oregon coast.
Yes.
It's really tough to take, I can tell you.
So, you know, I had time to put my 11,000 photos into albums on my computer. But I love to travel. I love it. And I love to go new places and experience new things. So, you know, I'd like to go to Patagonia and just, you know, do more military things and, you know.
Well, okay, so I do have two important questions. What advice would you give for someone who has a new product, not necessarily in your field, but someone who's trying to launch a company and build it? What's one of the greatest lessons you've learned?
Okay, I think that what's really important, and they should show no fear, that they should identify somebody who's already done what they've done. And don't be afraid. Call that person, take them out to lunch, and ask them these questions. What would they do, etc. And because it's, you know, rather than ask a relative who wants to dump on them or anything, go to people who have actually done it and get motivated. And a lot of times you'll get a new friend and they'll be very happy you asked them. So that's one thing that'll save a lot of time.
Yeah, and listening to people who have already done what you want to do and not taking advice
that are motivated, that have already shown what it takes to get to the top. Okay. Sam, your turn.
Sam, what's your advice?
Gosh, there's so many things, but one of the things I would say is just don't be afraid to screw up.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to do it, and just don't get so disappointed in it. I mean, that's just the way it is, and don't mistake action for progress. I mean, one of the things that Sherry and I remember was attending this meeting, and a friend of ours was trying to get his product out of the blocks, and it failed ultimately. But we said, well, how did it go? And how he measured success, he said, I gave away 24 mugs, plastic mugs. It was great. And that was his measure, that he brought in these plastic mugs with his logo, and he gave away 24 of these. Well, he could have given away 2,400. I mean, that's not a sign of success. So I would say, understand, how you're measuring your progress, and just be patient and don't be afraid to screw up. I think because you're going to do it. And if we could make it, look, we were most inept people in the world, the least trained. We had no business courses. We didn't even understand what a margin was or anything when we started. And we didn't understand that even the basic business terms, return on investment. But we understood the key things, and that is hard work and be willing to do what the other people aren't willing to do. And that's I think what separates you in life, no matter what you're doing. If you're willing to do the things the others aren't, then you're likely to succeed, whatever you're doing.
That's
That's
And
awesome.
it's going to be a
advice.
lot more fun.
Absolutely. Fun is important.
Yes.
So
And I'm so
last
grateful
question.
that.
Is there
Go ahead.
anything I haven't asked you that you'd love to share?
Oh, I don't know.
If you can't think of
I don't
anything,
know.
that's okay too.
I
No,
just,
I mean, we could go on, and obviously, I can. Sherry and I both could sit there, and we haven't even scratched the surface of the things that it took to, for example, to get the product in the military. If we scratch that surface, a lot of people would say, "Well, I'm not going to do that. I mean, I won't be willing to do all that, or I can't afford to do all that." There'll be a lot of reasons, but if you want to get ahead, you just have to be willing to do whatever, and that's it. I mean, anything, of course, it's legal and honest and won't hurt anyone else. That's kind of basic. That's
yeah.
fundamental.
And I think also, not being afraid to ask people for some help if you don't understand something, because one thing that they know, I used to have an outside door in our old office, and all you had to do was say regulatory, and I knew I was out the door. Because it's just, you got to know what you don't know. And I know marketing and certain things, but other things, the real technical stuff, no. And just when you don't know it, just know you don't know it and try and get some help, or find somebody who does know it and listen to them. And
Or have a good time, have fun.
yeah, just have fun, and just know that making errors is half the fun, and the people that have the best stories, that have gone through the most, are also the most fun. And you just look at somebody like Bill Gates or any of these multi-billionaires, and you just know they've got great stories to tell, and not somebody
Sure.
who just inherited it. So
Yeah. Well,
And
thank you so much.
nothing.
That's awesome advice. And last question, if people want to reach you and find out more about Sam Medical and its products, how do they connect with you?
go to
Just
go
go ahead, honey.
to sammedical.com and contact us through there. And
That's the best way.
that's the best way. And somebody will get back to you, and you could ask for Sam or Sherry, and either of us will be happy to call you and talk to you. And if you have questions or need some motivation, we're always available. We love doing that.
Or
I
maybe
know
we
you
can be
do. And
motivated.
I
Yes.
am so grateful to know you two, and that
Thank
you
you.
took time from your schedule to be on the Brand Aid podcast. I'm very happy you were here. And I just can't wait to have you back and hear more about the success, especially of the new product, and how the
Great. And
video conferencings are going.
yes, and I'm so
Great
happy
to
to
see
see
you.
what you're doing, because you
Yeah,
too are amazing, my darling.
Oh,
absolutely.
thank you both.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Dr. Sam and Cheryl Scheinberg are the founders of Sam Medical in Wilsonville, Oregon. Sam Medical specializes in on-scene products that help first responders around the globe save lives.
Have you protected your big ideas? Is your online business built on a strong legal and business foundation? To learn more about the legal protection you need for your online business and how to use intellectual property to leverage the growth and profitability of your business, check out our new mini-sode series, Built to Last. I'll be sharing what I've learned during my business and legal career, and how you can use those lessons to build a lasting legacy for your own business. So join me for my solo flight on the Brand Aid Built to Last mini-sodes.
That's it for today's episode. Head on over to brandaidpodcast.com and subscribe to the show. When you subscribe, you'll instantly receive Cheryl's free special gift, Consumer Guide to Trademark Registration Services. This consumer guide will help ensure your most valuable business assets are entrusted to professionals. Make certain you're on the path to a business and brand built to last. Join our Brand Aid community on the Podopolo mobile app to win prizes, products, and cool free resources to help you grow your business. And also connect with Cheryl and your friends. Podopolo is free on the Apple and Google App Stores. And when you go to brandaidpodcast.com/win and post a review to iTunes, you'll be entered into a drawing to win a once-in-a-lifetime VIP Brandaid opportunity to mastermind with Cheryl personally to grow and scale your business, or to select, secure, and sustain a valuable brand name for your business. That's Podopolo on the Apple and Google App Stores. Download it now.